It is Tuesday, the 21st of September 2021, the autumn equinox, a good point on which to reflect and take stock of things, as the days and the nights reach equal length at this changing of the seasons. And I'm someone who, since waking up to great truth, I've really learnt to appreciate the spring and the summer months and that connectedness to nature, the increased hours of exposure to the life-giving sun. And so round about this time of year, I find myself with a bit of a sense of panic, a bit of a sense of foreboding that we're heading into those longer nights, more hours of darkness, of cold, of the diminishing of the sun. And I get through it by reminding myself that everything is, of course, cyclical. This is part of the natural cycle of the passing of the seasons. And before we know it, we'll be out the other side into another spring. And so the cycle repeats itself all over again. And I think spring 2022 is going to be very different in a far more beneficial way than 2021 or 2020 were. So I feel there's much to be optimistic about there. I'll cover that some more as we go on. But I've just been getting over a pretty heavy and hectic weekend. Now, 10 or 15 years ago, when I was out there on the DJ circuit, my idea of what a heavy, hectic weekend would have consisted of would have been very different to where I'm at now. So the situation I've had this past weekend is I've had some awesome events, some amazing experiences. Just wanted to quickly relay some of these. So on Friday night, I was out there on Hampstead Heath, and I should probably quantify that statement a little bit more rather than just leaving it at that. I was on Hampstead Heath for a brilliant event, a gathering called Golden Frequencies. This is put together by Freya with assistance from her brother Dustin. Big props, big respect to Freya for putting on an amazing, awesome event. So this took place in a grove right out there in the woods, in the middle of the forest on Hampstead Heath. I didn't even know this part of London existed. You would swear you were way out in the sticks somewhere. You would not have believed that you were in London to be a part of this setting. So it started off with some storytelling. So it was talks, presentations by any other name. But there were 4 or 5 of these. And the speakers were just stood there in the middle of this forest clearing with the assembled crowd sitting around, sitting on blankets and sitting on logs and just making the most of that natural setting, listening to what these speakers had to say. So it was my privilege to give a talk of about 20 minutes, talking about some of my main work, exposing the machinations and the nuts and bolts of the corporate-controlled music industry. And it seems a lot of those in attendance weren't already familiar with my work in these areas, so it was news to them. They found the information quite fascinating, seemed to go down very well. Gregory gave a great talk as well. He's an author and inventor that I've heard of for many years. I remember listening to his shows on Red Ice Radio going back quite a few years. A few other speakers in attendance as well. And then once that was all done, there were a few musicians got their guitars out, started jamming, and the culmination of the evening was some DJ activity. So initially it was DJs having to play off of laptops, run off of batteries, because there weren't initially any portable generators to have any DJ gear running. I'm told a generator did arrive in due course, and those parties went on way through the night. Danny Rampling was in attendance, and by all accounts, he played a blinder of a set. But unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to hear it, and I didn't get a chance to play any tunes myself because I would have required the use of a couple of CD mixers and a DJ mixer, which would have had to have run off the portable generator. And by the time this arrived, I sadly had to leave to get the last tube. back to where I was staying. So we were right in the middle of the bloody forest, and if I hadn't had a guide, if Ben had not told me how to get out of this bloody place, like Hansel and Gretel following breadcrumbs out of the forest, I might still be in there now. So I just made it back for the last tube, missed most of the party, but by all accounts that went on till 6 or 7 in the morning. So it's like a throwback to the old acid house rave free party days. Anyway, I had to get myself down to East Sussex the following day to be a part of the Uprise and Shine Freedom Conference taking place on a farm down there near Forest Row, close to East Grinstead, East Sussex. This was a great event. Much respect to Karen for organising this one. Big thanks to Emma for the accommodation and for everyone else involved in putting this event together. It was a real cooperative effort, and that was the spirit of the whole event. It was people coming together, each bringing something to the table, offering their own skills, their own talents, and generally just getting involved with the overall process of what needed to take part. If there was a table that needed to be set up in the corner, put out on some legs, decked out, ready to have some leaflets or magazines on it or whatever, there were people only too happy to do that. If there were some falafels needing to be prepared to go in the fryer to be a part of the vegan food setup, there were people prepared to do that. If there were chairs needing to be picked up at the end of the day and stacked up in the corner, people only too happy to do that. If somebody had a lead or a cable that was needed for a piece of equipment and they had it in the back of their car, they were only too happy to contribute that. And this was the overall nature of this event. It was a whole load of speakers coming together to offer empowering information on what happens when the shit hits the fan. So I feel a lot of us have focused much attention on the nature of what's going on in this world at the moment. The evidence to suggest that the control system cabal that we currently have and have had preside over us for a very long time is one way or another on the way out. Old systems of doing things are finished. To use that mantra once again, there's a new normal. The old normal is not coming back. So whatever that looks like, I feel not enough people will have given enough thought and attention to how we collectively reorganize ourselves on the other side of this. How we build communities in a much better way. Cooperative, mutually beneficial, on a voluntarist kind of basis. New systems of business, new systems of food and drink, natural health, providing energy, new systems for construction. That's one you hear all the time, isn't it? If there was no government, who would build the roads and the bridges? I'm sure we can find ways of achieving these things if we get our heads together. New systems of broadcasting, well, there's plenty of that going on now with alternative media and podcasting and people just finding whatever ways they can of getting their empowering information out there as an alternative to the mainstream media stranglehold on things. And so many other things, different aspects of technology, different aspects of lawfulness, the so-called legal system, just new ways of organising society generally. And that's what this event, Uprise and Shine, were all about. And when I say that not enough of us have given thought to these things, the individuals that were in attendance at this event most definitely had given a lot of thought to this type of stuff. I was so encouraged to hear so many ideas being shared, so many groups, so many organisations, so many hubs have now sprung up. And they're all bringing something to the table in terms of how we can all support each other moving forward. And this is what happens when you get a lot of hearts and minds pooling their consciousness, pooling their best ideas. One or two of us can feel pretty helpless maybe, pretty confused, pretty unproductive. We don't know where the answers lie. We might not know how we can possibly move forward as a collective. But as soon as you get 50 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 hearts and minds coming together, where they want the same thing, they're focused on the same goals, they want things to get to the same direction, they just don't know the journey that they're going to take to get there. Well, suddenly some very clear answers start to present themselves, because what this man might be lacking, this next woman might be an expert in, and she might be lousy in this, but this next guy over here is really good with this. So you might have somebody who's great at growing natural food, and he needs his fence painted, but he can't paint for toffee. So a situation arises where a system of bartering, a system of cooperation comes up, and one guy might say to the other, I'll give you this box of carrots if you come over and paint my fence. Or in my case, give me that box of turnips and I'll write you a book. So we all bring whatever we can to the table, So I saw lots of these types of ideas being exchanged, and I saw lots of pre-planning for what society may well look like, and the sort of things that we're going to have to achieve for ourselves, and the challenges we're going to have to rise up to once the shit has hit the fan. So first of all, loads of great groups offering these ideas, and secondly, lots and lots of conversations with many of these people over the weekend who really do feel that things are finally about to come to a head. So I've always held back from making too many predictions of things that I feel are going to happen. I fell into that trap early on of looking at dates and thinking about timescales, this sort of thing. Realised it was a mistake to do that, because nobody really knows for sure what is going to happen. We're just down to our best guesses. But there was a real consensus of opinion among people that I spoke to that things cannot go on the way they have been for very much longer before the dam is about to break. It's like the analogy of that children's story where the little boy has got his thumb in the dam, and there's cracks starting to appear in the dam wall all around him, and there's a colossal tidal wave of water just behind that cracked wall, waiting to come out as an avalanche, were it not for the fact that his thumb is just about holding all that in place. So you can use that as an analogy. You can use the tide is about to turn analogy. Either way, the point is things cannot continue the way they have been for very much longer. Things are going to break surface, and it's going to come down to the V situation, isn't it? The V agenda. There is now so much information out there, and it's only growing by the day, to convince even the most hardened skeptic that the V situation is, first of all, an agenda, always has been, to line the pockets of the big pharmaceutical corporations. But not only that, it goes much further and much darker. It's a depopulation exercise, as so many of us know. They are genocidal in nature. The minute that information gets out into the mainstream public consciousness to enough of a degree, you can talk about tipping points, you can talk about 100th monkeys, whatever it takes. The minute that gets achieved, it's game over, and there's going to be a lot of very frightened, very panicked, and very pissed off double jade normies running around like headless chickens, wondering what the hell they need to do. And who are going to be the very people that all these panicked normies come running to when they melt down and just don't know what to do? They'll be running to the likes of us, who have been trying to tell them about all of this. We've been trying to help them. We've been trying to reach out to them. We've been imploring them to look at the information that we've been presented. And we've been laughed at, we've been scoffed at, we've been knocked back, we've been called conspiracy theorists, we've been called anti-Vias, but watch how quick they come running when they suddenly realise that we were telling the truth after all. What do we do? What do we do? And so we're going to have to become some very strong trauma counsellors in the midst of this whole aftermath. And they can thank us later, for all of this, because we were only trying to help them all along. But really, there's just no way that the sick controllers are going to be able to keep a lid on all this information about the dangers of the V now, because it really is crumbling by the day. More and more doctors, more and more whistleblowers are coming forward. And it's more and more people's personal experienced situations. So many more people now know a close family member or a close friend or a work colleague who has died or suffered very severe reactions as a result of one of these things. I mean, how do they think it's going to be possible to push all this stuff back in and just prevent it from getting out there and becoming public knowledge? It's like putting a sticking plaster on a broken leg. It's damage limitation. It's only a matter of time before it does break surface. And they know this, of course, which is why they're panicking and rushing ahead at breakneck speed to get this agenda completed while they feel they still have time. That's why they've accelerated the whole Agenda 2030 thing in the first place and tried to cram it all into 1 year instead of rolling it out sequentially and incrementally over 10 years as they normally would do. So it can't be suppressed. The lid cannot be kept on it. And so we have to make contingency plans for what happens when the shit hits the fan, when it all breaks through. So very encouraged to see so many groups in existence already, little hubs springing up here and there. But what we really need is unity between these groups, between these networks, between these little hubs. Because at the moment there's little pockets of them all over the country, popping up here and there. It's great to see they're taking place, but we need to link these pockets together, sew up the pockets, to use the title of this video. There was the Hold the Line event the other week, where people in many different towns and cities were joining hands in unity, in solidarity, to show resistance to the tyranny that's going on and show that they're supporting their fellow brother and sister in standing for freedom. And this was great to see, and some of these lines evidently went on for many miles. But what would have been so much better and would have made so much more of a profound statement is if all these individual geographically situated lines could have joined together into one nationwide line. So you literally have a line of hands stretching from John O'Groats to Land's End, all the way along. And that's a good analogy for what needs to happen with all these individual groups and networks. Great work though they're doing, many of these need to come together to form super groups and super hubs. And inevitably this is going to involve doing something which doesn't come naturally to the human state, to the human spirit, it seems. And that involves the putting aside of the ego and focusing instead on a common shared goal and objective and getting there no matter what it takes. Because this seems to be a great advantage that our enemies, our adversaries, have over us. They don't have any problem with fixing their sights on a desired direction and getting themselves there no matter what it takes. They seem to be able to put aside individual differences, ego problems, personality clashes. They seem to take the view that none of that stuff really matters over and above the end goal. Let's achieve the end goal, then we can worry about all that stuff. Then we can iron out who's better than the next man and who's got the best idea and whose name should go on this project and whatever. So we collectively need to put aside that ego, Stop worrying about, is my group better than that one, and I think things should be done this way, and finding that common ground, getting those hearts, minds and souls together, pooling those ideas, and again, on the basis that one or two people can't possibly have all the answers, but several hundred between them will. One man or woman cannot change the world, but they can be an essential part in the process that does. That's an observation I've liked to end many of my public talks on. My talk from the Uprise and Shine conference on Saturday in East Sussex was filmed. Big shout to Miles Johnston. I'm looking to get hold of the footage of that in the next few days, and I'm told that I'm going to be able to share that as soon as I get my hands on it. So as soon as it's available, look for it on my YouTube channel and my BitChute and in all the other regular outlets. So that'll be coming soon. Played a great DJ set on Saturday night. Really enjoyed that. Actually, the most enjoyable set that I've played since 2019. It was a bit of a shindig, and I think many of us needed and appreciated that. Met a lot of interesting people synchronistically at that party. And this is another point that I made at the start of my talk for Golden Frequencies on Friday night. I made the observation that 15 to 20 years earlier, at that time on a Friday, I would have been getting ready to go out and play some DJ gig somewhere or other, because back in those days, that's all that really mattered to me. All that was important was the next gig, the next party, the music. And how amazing my life's become since I bit the bullet and dared to step out and take a walk on the wild side, take some risks. He who dares wins, as Delboy Trotter used to say. Well, it's true, it turns out. If you stay in your comfort zone, you'll probably just end up plodding along the same way you always did. But if you dare to burn some bridges, move forward to the point where you know there's no going back to where you came from. So there are risks involved, but those risks almost always repay you and make it all worthwhile. So if I'd stayed on that path, I might still be playing the odd interesting club here and there. Not for the last 18 months, obviously. But I would have been missing out on opportunities like being in a forest in the middle of Hampstead Heath on a Friday night with amazing people, listening to storytellers around a roaring, crackling, burning fire, and then listening to amazing sounds out there under the stars in the middle of the trees, and then being at this conference all weekend with like-minded people, playing a gig at a marquee to 200 people dancing and jumping up and enjoying themselves and getting all kinds of empowering information, networking with all these incredible people out there camping in a field, in a farm for the weekend. And these are the kind of experiences that I synchronistically attract towards myself now as a result of what I've pledged and decided to do with my life. And when you align yourself with truth and right action, you find these kinds of situations, scenarios, experiences, people attract themselves to you because you're syncing with them vibrationally. It's all about frequencies. These experiences, these events, these people carry a certain vibrational resonance, and when you step into that resonant zone, you find yourself mingling with all these amazing things. And that's been my experience these past few years, and I had a few discussions with people at the weekend. It's been their experience as well. So you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain, really, by taking that walk on the wild side, taking that plunge, moving forward, never looking back, and embracing the full potential that life has to offer and wants to offer, just so long as you'll allow it in. That was brought home to me this last weekend as well. On to the mailbag. I've just got one excerpt this time round that I want to read out. that this individual has communicated to me. She's written, "I suffer from cystic fibrosis. I'm looking particularly for others like me with long-term illnesses who want to survive in a post-scamdemic world." And this ties in beautifully again with other aspects of this video from earlier on. There will be a shortage of medications, probably, but I'm trying to find others with illnesses such as diabetes, cystic fibrosis, maybe heart or kidney problems that haven't yet taken the arm spear, the needlecraft. We need to form some kind of support group. We need strength in numbers and access to medicines after the shit has hit the fan and passed. I do believe we will win this, and some may survive but be injured, both physically and mentally. We deserve to live on, all of us. Creation has provided us with a platform called human existence and blessed us with the gift of critical thinking so that we may save others who cannot think for themselves. So that's pretty much a comment, an observation that can be left there, but it just ties in with this notion that it may not be long now until we really do have to find new ways of organising ourselves with things that we have so far just taken for granted. We may be getting very close to that point now. Announcements. First thing I want to put out there is to mention this new publication called Brighter Times. So it's a magazine along very similar lines to the Light newspaper. And there were vast quantities of these in attendance at the Uprise and Shine conference. It's got all kinds of articles talking about what that event was discussing, new ways of organising ourselves and new approaches to aspects of our lives that we've taken for granted up to this point. So these magazines are available for distribution. The idea is that they get all over the country, similar to the Light newspaper. So if anyone wants to get involved in being a distributor for Brighter Times, then I'll drop an email address into the show notes below. Feel free to give them a shout and you'll be able to get a quantity of these that you can give out in your own communities or at events that you attend or anything else of that nature. It's great to see so many of these starting to spring up now. This is exactly what I was talking about. We're going to need to find new ways of media. We can't trust the lying, controlled, bastardized corporate mainstream media anymore. Not that we ever could. So we're going to need new newspapers, new magazines, new radio stations, new TV stations, all this kind of thing. Speaking of alternative TV broadcast platforms, I was happy to appear on an episode of Right Now with Gareth Icke on the Iconic platform this Friday, just gone, at 7 p.m. So my section there was only about 10 minutes or so. I was just giving my views on current situations. I'm hoping to get hold of the footage of just my little chat there. And if I do, I'll be posting it here and in all the usual places. I was very interested to see that also on that show as a guest, they had Gregory Paul Martin, who is the eldest son of the famous Beatles producer George Martin. The interesting thing about Gregory Martin is, first off, he voiced the audiobook version of The Memoirs of Billy Shears, which purports to be the expose of the individual currently playing the role of Paul McCartney. This goes into the whole theory of the original Paul McCartney having died back in 1966 and the public role having been played ever since by an individual usually identified as William Campbell or William Shepherd, known as Billy Shears. That's what that book makes out anyway. And the audiobook version of it, as I say, was narrated by George Martin's eldest son, which would suggest some sort of cooperation or some sort of endorsement on his part and possibly the Martin family's part to the story, the narrative being put forward by that book. Anyway, the interesting thing about Gregory Paul Martin is he's been going balls out recently. in terms of exposing the tyranny, the lies, the deceptions, and the absolute monumental sham that is the Convid scamdemic. He's had no problem expressing exactly how he feels about it, and he appears to be a bona fide truther. So that's interesting, isn't it? Coming from somebody so closely connected to the Beatles' inner circle. I look forward to listening to that chat from that Right Now show as well. This Saturday, the 25th of September, I'm still hoping as many people as possible will be able to get up to Newcastle upon Tyne and stand shoulder to shoulder, showing solidarity to their brothers and sisters out there who are going to be protesting and going out on a freedom march and rally. The last event in Newcastle descended into a shocking, appalling orgy of violence and mayhem at the hands of the police. It cannot happen this time, and these bullies are going to find it so much more difficult to throw their weight around if there are many tens of thousands of people in attendance rather than the few hundred there were last time. So I hope people will be able to get to Newcastle to be a part of that thing. But for anyone that's going to be in London for the Freedom Rally there this coming Saturday, hoping to get the numbers through the roof once again to get back to the kind of scale of outcome that we were seeing back in the summer, the early summer. That's all happening this coming Saturday, and I am due to be DJing at the after this one, open air in a park. More details closer to the time. Keep an eye on those Telegram groups, those Facebook groups. But the idea is that it all culminates in a big after party, and I've been invited to DJ at this one. Didn't work out last time, but apparently it's going to this time. Just depends on who you leave to do the organisation, I guess. And reportedly, Danny Rampling is going to be involved in this one as well. So I didn't get to DJ with Danny out in the woods of Hampstead last weekend, but hopefully I will do this coming weekend. I just recorded a new Good Vibrations podcast with Charlie Freak. Now, I did 4 epic length shows with Charlie last year. With this one, we're not addressing any of the subject matter that we got into last time round. We're leaving that parked firmly to the side. Instead, we're going into the spiritually empowering metaphysical truths that have been encoded into rock music lyrics over the decades. And this whole concept is going to form a major part of my upcoming book, Musical Truth Volume 3, particularly the last chapter, the note and the tone with which I leave readers as a parting shot in the book. I'm going to be drawing on a lot of the work that Charlie Freak has put out there in this regard, and that's what this interview was all about. It's Charlie's interpretation of what so many of these young songwriters, rock musicians, had put into their recordings to communicate to those that could read between the lines. Charlie is a master at decoding this stuff, and he shared his views on what was being communicated, these amazingly powerful messages. So watch out for the new edition of Good Vibrations in conversation with Charlie Freak, and we're not talking about certain taboo subject areas, even though we touch on one or two. But enjoy the show anyway. Other than that, I think that's about it for this time around. Remember to get involved in distributing Brighter Times if you can. And I'll see you out and about at a freedom event near you soon as we get ever closer to that dam cracking beyond any potential repair. And I think we're getting close now, people. We have to be getting close.